The dim hum of the city poured through my office window, the distant honking of horns blending with the low murmur of chatter from the cafe below. My desk was a mess of contracts and invoices, the chaos matching the swirling turmoil in my mind. But nothing could distract me from the glaring problem that loomed over me like an impending storm: my parents. They had been hounding me for weeks about bringing someone home for their anniversary party, making it sound like my absence of a love life was the world's greatest tragedy. Their not-so-subtle hints about me being too focused on work made my stomach churn with dread. So, in a moment of desperation, fueled by caffeine and a flickering shred of rebellion, I had made a decision I wasn't entirely proud of. I would hire someone. It seemed absurd, borderline ridiculous even. But in the world of modern solutions to modern problems, nothing was impossible. A discreet internet search led me to an agency specializing in temporary companions, with glowing reviews of their professionalism and authenticity. And that's how I found myself sitting at a corner booth in a dimly lit lounge, waiting to meet my fake girlfriend. She arrived precisely on time, her presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room without even trying. She was tall, with legs that seemed to go on for days, and her hair was a cascade of auburn waves that shimmered under the amber glow of the lights. She wore a sleek black dress that clung to her figure in all the right ways, paired with heels that clicked against the floor with confident precision. Her lips curved into a smirk as she slid into the booth across from me. "Ethan, I presume?" she asked, her voice smooth and low, like the first sip of whiskey on a cold night. I cleared my throat, trying to ignore the sudden dryness that had taken up residence there. "Yes, that's me. And you must be?" "Layla," she said, extending a hand. Her nails were painted a deep crimson, matching the daring shade of her lipstick. "Let's cut to the chase. You need a girlfriend to impress your parents, and I'm here to make it happen. Tell me the details." Her directness was both disarming and oddly comforting. I found myself explaining my predicament, laying out the intricate dynamics of my family and their expectations. She listened intently, her gaze unwavering, as if she were memorizing every word. "And how long will this arrangement last?" she asked, her fingers lightly tracing the rim of her glass. "Just the weekend," I replied, trying to sound nonchalant despite the heat creeping up my neck. "The party is on Saturday night, and then there's a family brunch on Sunday. After that, we're done." "Simple enough," she said, her lips curling into a knowing smile. "And you want them to believe we're madly in love, right?" "Convincingly." She leaned forward, her perfume, a mix of vanilla and something more intoxicating, wrapping around me like a silk scarf. "Ethan, when I'm done, they won't just believe it. They'll be planning our wedding." Something about the way she said it, with such unshakable confidence, sent a shiver down my spine. But before I could respond, the waiter arrived with our drinks, giving me a moment to gather my thoughts. ####. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Layla was meticulous in her planning, drilling me with questions about my likes, dislikes, and quirks. She wanted to know everything, from my childhood nickname to the way I took my coffee, to ensure our story was flawless. "The key is chemistry," she said one evening as we sat in my apartment, surrounded by takeout containers and an alarming number of index cards. "We need to know each other so well that it's second nature." "Does this mean I have to learn your quirks too?" I teased, earning a playful glare. "Exactly," she said, her smirk returning. "So pay attention." As the days passed, I found myself genuinely enjoying her company. Layla was sharp, witty, and effortlessly charming. She had a way of making every moment feel like an adventure, her laughter filling the spaces in my apartment that had once felt so empty. But the real test came on Friday night, when she accompanied me to my office to accidentally meet my boss, Grant Nichols. Grant was a sharp-eyed man with a penchant for prying into his employees' personal lives. If anyone could sniff out our ruse, it was him. Layla was unfazed. In fact, she seemed to relish the challenge. We arrived at the office party, Layla's hand casually draped over my arm. She looked stunning in a deep emerald dress, her smile dazzling enough to rival the glittering chandelier above us. As we mingled, she effortlessly charmed my colleagues, slipping into the role of my devoted girlfriend with an ease that left me in awe. When Grant approached us, his sharp gaze flicking between us like a hawk sizing up its prey, I felt my pulse quicken. But Layla was ready. "So you're Ethan's boss," she said, her tone warm and inviting. "He's told me so much about you." Grant raised an eyebrow. "Has he now? And what exactly has he said?" Layla's laughter was like music, light and genuine. "Only that you're the reason he's been working so hard lately. He's determined to impress you." Grant's expression softened, a hint of pride flickering in his eyes. "Well, he's certainly one of our best." "And how did the two of you meet?" Layla glanced at me, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "It's a funny story, actually. We were at this bookstore, both reaching for the same copy of The Great Gatsby. It was like something out of a movie." I felt a grin tug at my lips as she spun the tale, weaving in little details that made it feel all too real. By the time she finished, Grant was laughing, his earlier scrutiny replaced with genuine warmth. As the evening went on, I couldn't help but marvel at Layla's ability to navigate every interaction with grace and charm. She was like a chameleon, adapting seamlessly to any situation. And yet, there was something undeniably authentic about her, a spark that drew people in and made them want to stay. When the party finally wound down, we stepped out into the crisp night air. Layla looped her arm through mine, her smile softer now. "That went well," she said, her voice laced with satisfaction. "You were incredible," I admitted, unable to hide my admiration. "I don't know how you do it." She shrugged, her eyes glinting with amusement. "It's a gift. But don't get too comfortable, Ethan. The real challenge is tomorrow." As we walked toward the car, I felt a strange warmth settle in my chest. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't dreading the weekend. If anything, I was looking forward to it. What I didn't realize then was that Layla was more than just a solution to my problem. She was a fire I hadn't known I needed, igniting something in me that had long been dormant. And as the city lights blurred into the distance, I couldn't help but wonder if this arrangement of convenience was about to become something far more complicated. The estate, or as my parents called it, our modest home, was as extravagant as ever. A sprawling, ivy-covered mansion set atop a hill, it loomed over the manicured gardens and pristine fountains below. Every time I visited, I felt like a fraud, an intruder in a world I was never entirely comfortable with. And now, as I stepped out of the car with Layla on my arm, that discomfort threatened to swallow me whole. Layla, of course, was unflappable. She stood beside me, her presence a calming counterpoint to my nerves. Her hand lightly grazed mine, a subtle but deliberate reminder, "I've got this." "Ready?" she asked, her lips curving into that signature smirk of hers. "Not even close," I admitted, earning a soft laugh from her. We walked up the grand staircase, and before I could even knock, the door flew open. My mother stood there, her eyes alight with curiosity and a touch of skepticism. "Ethan," she exclaimed, pulling me into a tight hug before turning her attention to Layla. And you must be? Layla, she said, stepping forward with the poise of royalty. It's so lovely to finally meet you, Mrs. Carter. Ethan's told me so much about you. My mother's eyes sparkled with thinly veiled approval. Has he now? Well, come in, come in. Everyone's in the drawing room. As we stepped inside, I caught Layla glancing around, her gaze lingering on the ornate chandeliers and gilded mirrors. Subtle, she murmured under her breath, just loud enough for me to hear. I stifled a laugh, grateful for her ability to cut through the tension. But as we entered the drawing room, where a sea of familiar faces turned to greet us, my anxiety returned with a vengeance. Ethan, my father boomed, his voice as commanding as ever. And who is this lovely young lady? Dad, this is Layla, I said, feeling oddly protective as I introduced her. My girlfriend. Layla extended her hand with a warm smile. It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Carter. Ethan's told me so much about you. All good things, I hope, my father replied, shaking her hand firmly. Well, any woman who can put up with this one is a saint in my book. Layla laughed, a soft, musical sound that seemed to charm everyone in the room. Within moments, she was swept into the fold, seamlessly navigating conversations with my relatives and deflecting their nosy questions with practiced ease. I watched her in awe, wondering how someone could make such an impossible situation look so effortless. But then came the moment I had been dreading, my mother's interrogation. She cornered us near the piano, her gaze sharp and probing. So, Layla, she began, her tone dripping with curiosity. How did you two meet? Without missing a beat, Layla launched into our carefully crafted story. It was at a bookstore, she said, her eyes sparkling as she spoke. We reached for the same book, and the rest, as they say, is history. How romantic, my mother said, though her expression suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. And what do you do, dear? I'm a freelance designer, Layla replied smoothly. I work with brands to create unique visual identities. It's challenging, but I love it. It was a half-truth, one we had agreed upon to keep things simple. But as my mother continued to press her, Layla's composure never wavered. She answered every question with grace and charm, her quick wit deflecting even the most intrusive inquiries. By the time dinner was served, it was clear that Layla had won over nearly everyone in the room. My parents, though still somewhat skeptical, seemed genuinely impressed. And as we sat down at the long, candlelit table, I couldn't help but feel a swell of gratitude for the woman sitting beside me. ####. The night wore on, and as the wine flowed, the atmosphere grew more relaxed. Layla and I found ourselves sitting on the terrace, the cool night air a welcome reprieve from the warmth inside. Your family is intense, she said, her tone light but laced with genuine observation. You're telling me, I replied, running a hand through my hair. Thank you for everything. I couldn't have done this without you. She turned to me, her expression softening. You're giving me too much credit. You've handled yourself pretty well tonight. I laughed, the sound more nervous than I intended. I'm not sure I believe that, but thanks. For a moment, we sat in comfortable silence, the distant hum of cicadas filling the air. I found myself stealing glances at her, my gaze lingering on the way the moonlight danced across her features. She was beautiful, yes, but there was something more to her, something that drew me in and made it impossible to look away. Ethan, she said, breaking the silence. Can I ask you something? Of course. She hesitated, her brow furrowing slightly. Why did you really hire me? I mean, I know what you told me, but it feels like there's more to it. I looked away, the question catching me off guard. I guess I just didn't want to disappoint them. My parents, they've always had these expectations and I've never been able to live up to them. Layla studied me for a moment, her gaze thoughtful. You know, you're not as bad at this as you think. At what? Being human, she said, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. You're honest. It's refreshing. I felt my cheeks flush, a warmth spreading through me that had nothing to do with the wine. Coming from you, I'll take that as a compliment. She laughed softly, the sound sending a shiver down my spine. It was meant as one. Before I could respond, the door to the terrace creaked open, and my mother stepped outside. There you two are, she said, her tone light but laced with curiosity. We're about to cut the cake. We'll be right in, I said, standing and offering Layla a hand. She took it, her touch sending an electric jolt through me. As we walked back inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us. The lines of our arrangement were beginning to blur, and for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to keep them intact. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. Layla had been everything I needed her to be, charming, convincing, and utterly captivating. But the more time I spent with her, the more I found myself wanting something I couldn't quite name. This was supposed to be simple. A weekend of pretending, nothing more. But as the hours ticked by, I realized that my heart had other plans. And as the first rays of dawn crept through the curtains, I couldn't help but wonder, was I falling for her, or for the lie we had created? Either way, I knew one thing for certain. By the time this weekend was over, nothing would ever be the same.